My name is Joseph O'Connor and I'm from Dublin in Ireland, a great literary city, the hometown of Joyce and Beckett and Yeats and Roddy Doyle and lots of wonderful people. And I'm here in Iowa City, another great UNESCO city of literature, because my novel Ghostlight has just been published. So I'm on book tour for 2 weeks across the United States and I'm starting here. So what better place to be starting? Readers often want to know how you got started with writing, where a writer gets his or her ideas from, how a writer chooses the theme of a novel. They're all very interesting questions, funnily enough. To answer them, I suppose that I'm not really sure about the extent to which writers choose their themes at all. I mean, often the process seems to work the other way around. In fact, an image or an idea just unfurls itself in your imagination and you find that you have no choice except to follow and see where it leads. And where every writer starts is where every reader starts, just by an entrancement and a fascination with that wonderful process of fiction. I suppose the wonderful game that's at the heart of fiction, which really is saying to the reader, I'm going to tell you this story about people who never existed, and you're going to pretend that they did, and we're going to meet each other halfway, and we're going to go on this journey together. And it's the wonderful paradox of fiction, I suppose, that remarkably, when we step out of the self for that temporary, defined time of the story, when we see through the process of empathy what it's like to be somebody else, we come back with a greater knowledge about what it's like to be us. So it's a really miraculous thing, the story. Well, I have 2 sons who are 10 and 6, and they make a lot of noise, and they're very interested in what I do for a living. So I'm very fortunate in that in our home back in Dublin, I have a little room at the end of our garden which can't even be seen from the house, and I do most of my writing there. It's a great thing for all sorts of reasons, not just artistic ones, for everybody in a family to have a room they can go to. So I write there, but I find, I suppose, like most writers, that writing never really stops. You know, you're working all the time. You carry your characters round with you. You see things in the street, in conversations, in overheard bits of dialogue on the train or the bus that sort of spark off your imagination, and you use them as a way of filtering through, I suppose, what's useful in the story that you're working on at the moment, what might live in that story and what might not. A writer who I love, a writer who meant a lot to me as a kid, the late great Irish author John McGahern, said that what a writer needs first is a way of seeing. You know, writing can be learnt. You know, really you could train most people to write, but it's what they're going to write about, what they see, and every writer needs that first, a unique way of seeing the world. The novel that has influenced me most, I suppose, throughout my life as a reader is James Joyce's Ulysses, which is just such a wonderfully rich, splendid, difficult, pretentious novel, seriously in need of an editing. I mean, a novel full of so many faults, but yet so rich and so generous about the human condition. And like all great novels, it changes depending on the age you are when you read it. When I read it first as a young man, as a student, I saw one set of qualities about it. Not very many, I have to say. I disliked it when I was young. I found it very, very difficult, very hard to connect with. And when I read it in my 30s, I saw something else. And now I'm in my 40s. Like most people in their 40s, when they encounter James Joyce's Ulysses, they realise that in the character of Leopold Bloom, the middle-aged man at the heart of the book, there's just one of the most wonderful characters that has ever been created in fiction. He's so human, so frail, so flawed, and yet so full of generosity and openness to the world. And of course the sentences are so beautiful. It's just a beautiful musical experience. You could open Ulysses on pretty much any page and find, a sentence that would blow you away. There's a scene in it where Bloom is looking at the night sky over Dublin, and he remarks that the stars are like the heaven tree of night hung with humid night blue fruit. And I mean, you imagine the hours that must have gone into the construction of that sentence. So on every level, really, it's just the most splendid and rich reading experience. Well, I think the way you recharge your batteries as a writer is to look to your work as a means of providing you with a standard. I mean, what I mean is that every writer, while they're working, has successes and failures. You see a page that went well, a paragraph that didn't go quite so well. And you develop the habit over the years, I suppose, of using the passages and the sentences and the paragraphs that did go well as a kind of tuning fork, as a reminder of the standard of which you're capable. And the ultimate aim then is to write a novel where every sentence will be as good as every other one, and every character will be as richly achieved and as complicated and as real. So you look to the world and you look to your own work to recharge your batteries. And you accept that they won't get recharged. Writing is a very tiring occupation. It's a tough way to spend your life, and you need to love it to do it. I mean, you need to have a sort of passionate love for the possibilities of the English language in order to write at all. But I often tell students when I teach younger people that particular form of love that's required for writing, it's a lot more like marriage than it is like falling in love. With writing, you have good days and bad days. You have moments when it's going fantastically and moments when it's not going quite so well, and you sometimes have a little argument, a little falling out with writing, and you need to fall in love with it all over again. But you're in it for the long term. It's a long-term commitment, and you're hoping that over the span of a life that it will be worthwhile. No, I mean, there's no one thing that I've wanted to include in my work that I've never found a place for. In fact, I think the process is somewhat the other way around. I think most writers are actually telling the same story all the time, in different guises. And it's usually a story that came to them when they were very young. And, the process of ridding yourself of masks and false voices and impersonations and trying to write like other people, like the writers you loved yourself, is really a process of coming closer to your own story all of the time. So, I mean, I've written 7 novels, which are wildly different to some degree. Some of them are set in the contemporary world, some of them are set in the 19th century. But I think of them really as always the same story, just with disguises on. Well, writing is very interesting because it's spiritual and material. It's sacred and profane. Bono said once about rock music that it's the spirit of being in the alley on Saturday night and being in the church on Sunday morning. And I think that's true of most kinds of writing. You approach mystery, I suppose, when you're writing or reading. And mystery is sacred. Mystery is about the parts of us that we don't understand. And often, in situations like this or in meetings with readers, writers are asked why they write and so on. And because of the process of media, writers have become good at formulating very clever answers to that. But I suspect that the real truth is that often a writer is writing because he or she doesn't know something. They're not sure. That it's like an itch. It's like being in a room at a party where people are singing and somebody forgets the words, and you know the words, but you're a bit nervous about joining in. And you're saying to yourself, God, if only someone would stop, if only someone would look around and say, does anyone know the words, then I might do it. So it's about the hidden things in us, the mysteries. You know, Yeats says that all poetry comes from the foul rag and bone shop of the heart. And I think all fiction comes from there too. But the foul rag and bone shop of the heart can be a very holy place. Who is a writer? Well, every reader is a writer, for a start. What a reader does is far more important than what a writer does. Because what the reader does is to take these little black ink stains on a page, that's all they are, and turn them into a story. It's a really remarkable thing when you think about it. And it's why we have differing notions about the great novels that we love. It's why most of us feel that movie adaptations of novels are never quite right, because we have our own movie, and your movie is different to mine. You put 20 people in a room who've read War and Peace, and they will remember it and précis it very, very differently. So I think a novel is really like a piece of sheet music. You know, you give the sheet music to the reader, and it's the reader who makes the song. So every great reader is a writer. That's the answer to that question. You know, it's the reader who makes everything happen, and the writer is just part of that process.